Is fascism a left-wing or a right-wing movement? If you're a leftist, the answer is obvious. Fascism is a movement of the right. They consider fascism actually the bastard child of conservatism and capitalism. And leftists would point out the fact that Mussolini and Hitler were definitely anti-leftists, anti-communist. They did not abolish private property. And they would point out that fascism believes in hierarchies among states, among nations, and in some of its versions, even among races. So how could such a movement be a movement of the left? But you can hear many reasonable people making the case that fascism is actually a movement of the left. After all, Nazi stands for National Socialism, and we know that Mussolini was a socialist. And we know that fascists advocate for greater state control over the economy. In this building, in October 1932, Oswald Mosley founded the British Union of Fascists. Mosley joined the parliament with the Conservatives, the party of the right. But then he joined Labour, the party of the left. And then he formed his own party, which transformed to something like a fascist organization. Mosley's journey shows how difficult it is to figure out whether fascism is a movement of the left or a movement of the right. So let's dive a bit deeper. Let's see the best arguments from both sides, and let's see where this gets us. Let us begin with the most controversial view, the one that claims that fascism is a movement of the left. The first reason is because fascism was radical and revolutionary. Radical because it was a movement aiming at toppling the status quo and disrupting the institution. Fascism envisioned a break between before fascism and after fascism. Fascism would be a new era. And fascism can be characterized as a revolutionary movement because it wanted to drastically change society. So when I say it was a revolutionary movement, it doesn't mean necessarily a good movement. Actually, most revolutionary movements in history have led to disasters. So I know that the left wants to maintain this monopoly on the term revolutionary, but there's no reason to go with it. A revolutionary is a movement that wants to completely change how things are, and fascism was definitely such a movement. And also, let's remember that fascism was relying on the mobilization of the masses, on getting the people involved in the political game. And again, this is a characteristic usually associated with the left. Reason number two why many people associate fascism with the left. Fascists definitely saw themselves as socialists, at least many did. Remember, what does Nazi stand for? It stands for National Socialist. And we know that many fascists had their roots in the anti-capitalist left, or saw themselves as having links to the left. Think, for example, Mussolini, Bombazzi in Italy, Eichmann in Germany, the Strasser brothers, even Goebbels himself. You've definitely heard the argument that Mussolini started his career as a socialist, which is entirely true. But did you know that also in his last years, Mussolini rediscovered himself as a socialist? Actually, he said that the problem with fascism is that it was not socialist enough. And he died, he was executed together with a guy called Nicola Bombazzi. Bombazzi was among the founders of the Communist Party of Italy, and later tried to fuse communism with fascism. Reason number three, there is a strong anti-capitalist ethos on fascism. Why? Because capitalism is related with this bourgeois ethos of individualism, of living what they would consider a soft life, a life where you want to enjoy the material stuff, the good things that this life has to offer. And the fascists are not happy with this attitude towards life at all. Also, listen to some of the founding principles of the Nazi Party, aka their 25-point program. Listen to them and ask yourselves, Does this remind you of a right-wing or of a left-wing party? Point number 11. The abolition of incomes unearned by work, breaking the slavery of interest. Point number 13. We demand the nationalization of all businesses which have been formed into corporations, into trusts. Point number 14. We demand profit sharing in large industrial enterprises. Point number 16. We demand the immediate communalizing of big department stores and their lease at a cheap rate to small traders. Point number 17. We demand the passing of a law for the expropriation of land for communal purposes without compensation. Like, listen to these people. Expropriating land for communal purposes? That's obviously a leftist agenda. And point number 18. We demand the ruthless prosecution of usurers, profiteers, etc. And they must be punished with death, whatever their creed or race. Also, let's remember that the Nazi Party, at least until 1934, had a distinct left-wing fraction within the party, a fraction led by the Strasser brothers. And I want you to read the following quote to a friend of yours and have them guess who came up with it. I'm sure they're going to tell you it's from Karl Marx or something, but actually this is a quote by Heinrich Himmler in 1926. And Himmler said, quote, "In the course of history, periods of capitalism and socialism alternate. Capitalism is the unnatural, socialism the natural economic system. Capitalism seizes control of machinery, the most noble invention of mankind, and uses it to enslave people. This causes people to long for freedom, and this longing expresses itself in the workers' class struggle." End of quote. So here you have it, people. Himmler talking about capitalism being unnatural and how class struggle is a very proper reaction to it. This is clearly leftist language. And also, let us remember that Nazis called each other comrade, and comrade was also used among the communists and the socialists. And if you ever get the opportunity to see one of their rallies in color, I mean, not in black and white, you will see that the color that jumps out is red. Red was everywhere in their banners. Now, let us get to the more conventional view that sees fascism as a movement of the right. Reason number one is the values that fascism espouses. Fascism mobilizes right-wing themes, ideas such as the nation, religion sometimes, family, and even private property. Reason number two, the allies of fascism. The political space in which fascism operated was the right. The political movements and political parties that tolerated or supported the fascists were all movements of the right, of the authoritarian right and of the conservative right. Reason number three, fascism's anti-egalitarianism. Fascism is clearly an elitist movement, a movement that believes in leaders and followers, a movement that believes in better nations or sometimes better races and inferior nations or inferior races. Reason number four, the positioning of fascists. Fascists saw themselves as rallying against the left. They viewed themselves as saving their societies from leftism or from communism or Bolshevism. So wherever the left is, they saw themselves on the other side. These were some of the main arguments that people who consider fascism a right-wing movement use. Let us notice something. Both the fascists and the socialists, they have the same enemies. They both rally against the idea that you as an individual can understand the world. They both are against the idea that you should live life for your own happiness. And they both hate the institutions of a liberal society, such as, for example, a free market. They are just following different flanks, different paths on how they do attack the liberal society, the free society. But here is one thing we definitely know about the relationship between fascism and socialism. Fascists have always capitalized on the threat of the left, both in terms of using the left as a boogeyman, like we're going to save you from the left, but also capitalizing on the left's critique of capitalism. So what is actually happened is that the intellectuals of the left criticize the free market, criticize capitalism as alienating. The fascists agree with this criticism, and then in the last moment they say, we are the ones though who are going to overthrow this alienating bourgeois society. So imagine this picture. Imagine two people chopping off a tree. On the one side, the socialist, on the other side, the fascist. They both chop and they weaken the tree. And then at the last moment, the fascist blows the axe on the head of the socialist, puts them away, and then they tear down the tree, they put down the tree which is already weakened. This tree is the free liberal society, and both the socialists and the fascists undermine it and weaken it. And then they fight among each other to see who will give the final blow. At the end of the day, to answer whether fascism is a movement of the right or of the left, we need to figure out what do we mean by left and right, and do these terms even make sense? Now, traditionally, the right has been linked to maintaining the status quo, to protecting hierarchies, and keeping the masses outside of the political game. The idea of the right traditionally has been, some people know better how to govern, so let these people govern. Whereas the left traditionally has been linked with the idea of change, of disrupting hierarchies, and of having the people get a bigger say on how to run things and how to run their lives. But when you listen to these definitions, do they make sense to you? Like, is this how you have experienced the left? That the left wants to give people more control over their lives? That this is how you experience the new left or the left of the nanny state? So at the end of the day, the left and right, particularly for the last many decades, are not two distinct sets of ideas, because they keep changing their ideas all the time. Left and right should be viewed as two different teams, as two different tribes. They are in opposition to each other, they hate each other, but not because they have distinctly different ideas. And something else about all this left-right spectrum. Think about it this way. If communism is here and fascism is here, where would you put classical liberalism? Like, would you say that classical liberalism is in the middle because it wants a bit of fascism and a bit of socialism? And obviously this is not the case. So we currently have a political spectrum with no space for the alternative to these two sides, which means that the spectrum doesn't make sense. Think about that when we use the term left, we include in it people like Mao and someone like Kropotkin, who was against hierarchies. Or think about the term right. Are we serious that we are going to put Ayn Rand and Robert Nozick and Hitler under the same umbrella? That makes zero sense. So here's how to understand it. You have to understand that the only way to speak of right and left is as these tribes seeing themselves as, I am the opposite of the other side. And in this way, it makes sense, in my view, to view fascism as a movement of the right, because they viewed themselves as right and as being opposite from the left. At the end of the day, what matters is to understand that fascism is a form of collectivism, that fascism is a threat because it capitalizes this popular idea that you should live for something bigger than yourself, and that freedom is overrated because it leads to a life which is not heroic, and all these bromides that we hear. Everything else on whether fascism is on the left or on the right, this is about scoring political points. The important thing is to understand why fascism is bad, and it's for similar reasons on why socialism is bad. And I think the proper axis is not socialism, fascism. The proper axis is individualism, freedom, and totalitarianism, authoritarian collectivism. And the clear thing is that fascism is on the side of collectivism, authoritarianism, and on the other side we have freedom, or however you want to call it, classical liberalism. And people will say, oh, yes, but if fascists and socialists are on the same side, how come they fight? And how come they hate each other? Now, it is true that they hate each other, and it is true that they fight. But think about this. The fact that two tribes are fighting each other does not mean that they're fundamentally different. Actually, there are many examples throughout history of tribes fighting each other, which you will understand that they were not that different. Think about the Catholics and the Protestants. Were they that different in the big scheme of things? Think about Sunnis and Shiites. Think about Trotskyists and Stalinists, or Stalins and Maoists. They were at each other's throat. But what does this mean? Does this mean that they were fundamentally different in any meaningful way? And of course, they were fighting each other because at the end of the day, they are tribes fighting over the same territory. Tribes fighting over the same, literally, lands, and sometimes over the minds of the same, over the hearts and souls of the same people. So to be honest with you, I don't really care at the end of the day whether fascism is right or left, whatever that means. I know that fascism sucks because it is a collectivist movement. And put simply, a movement that tells you that your life isn't yours. A movement that tells you that you should sacrifice the one life that you have, the precious life that you have, you should sacrifice it for the dreams and the visions of a leader or of other people. But in any case, not your dreams, not your goals, not your visions. Which is why I think we should throw fascism to the same bin of history where we must throw socialism. And my feelings about fascism and socialism can be summarized by that line by Shakespeare: plague on both your houses.